Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your breakout sessions. I'm hearing from everyone involved that they were really, really great and a lot of great things discussed. So I'm really glad to hear that. I'd now like to hand the microphone back over to Lou Celli for our post-session discussion as well.
Well, thank you so much and welcome back, everyone. So we have 10 minutes left. We're going to hear now from all the discussion leaders about the key takeaways from their workshops. Unfortunately, we couldn't be in more than one place at one time, but we have our discussion leaders here that are going to tell us what they talked about, the key takeaways. And I'm going to start first with Kevin Taylor, who's from Access Communications. He was heading the session on the future of distance, rethinking mobility and infrastructure in a post-pandemic world. Kevin, what was the key takeaway from your discussion?
Yeah, I would say our key takeaway and what everything kept coming back to in terms of our discussion was data. And I'll steal a quote from our city use case discussion leader, Grace Quintana from the city of Bogota, that it's essential to select data relevant to tackle mobility challenges. And we heard that from everything in discussions from light rail transit to bus rapid transit to vehicular roadway traffic to micromobility. Relevant data is a crucial component in order to deliver these services and do proper planning within cities as we emerge from the pandemic.
Perfect. And that ties into session 2 that Bennett led, which was on making data a strategic asset and not a liability. So Bennett?
Yeah, thanks, Lou. By the way, you were very helpful in that session as well. So chime in if I forget anything. But we talked around about data and the importance of data, which is a very, very big part of what we're doing today, and just having so many devices and so many connected things, right? And one of the takeaways was that cities, and really kind of forced by recent, situation with the pandemic, have been forced to really share data across different departments and different silos in partnership. And that's to be able to have that visibility across the different boundaries, both internally to the city, but also across the different counties and the different boundaries that exist because, of course, the pandemic doesn't have physical boundaries. And so that was one of the key takeaways. I would say there's also a feeling that resourcing, specifically in the data analysis and data science areas, is something that is in demand and scarce supply. So seeing a lot of cities and one of the sentiments was being able to have those folks that can do that type of analysis is really something that they're interested in. And finding it hard to find those folks today. And then I think one of the interesting things that we kind of touched on at the end was the emergence of AI, machine learning, and some of the other techniques that I heard it talked about, the digital twin, enable us to take historical data and project that. Also do things like modeling of that without having to put those policies in play. And while it was agreed that that's an important piece, that we ought to make sure, we definitely have to make sure that we don't just solely rely on AI and historical data, because there is a certain amount of human judgment that still needs to be in play in these places, and looking at things like socioeconomic environments, looking at the impact on particular parts and politics in the policy, not just letting the data and the data science drive the decision. So,
yeah, well, thank you.
That, Lou?
Yeah, that's fantastic summary. So, in addition to data, partnerships are important for driving the success of cities and their use of the SDGs. We have Steve Ray, who will tell us more about what he heard at his session.
Thanks, Lou. I think Chris Castro put it in maybe the simplest terms. He said the strongest environmental ecosystems have strong biodiversity. So they have connections and partnerships across genomes, across animals, across plant life. Think about a city in the same way. Partnerships between different sectors can create the connections that can solve problems within a city. and that cities also can create opportunities for innovation through partnerships. Kelvin from Singapore mentioned Singapore's strategies of using grand challenges, of putting out grand challenges of how do we prevent evaporation of water on that island nation, and put it out to companies to help solve that problem, but then to own the technology and take that to other cities. With all of that, you still have to come together to educate your populace and even your city workforce, so they're not afraid of the partnerships and they don't view them as threatening. And that we also might have a almost in a lifetime opportunity, the funding that's going to come from federal governments, from national governments, from global institutions to recover from the pandemic can create long-term opportunities for investment that we should be looking at as partnership opportunities for leveraging other resources.
Perfect. Excellent. So Hervé, I know you led the session, which is the core theme of the whole meeting, which is the SDGs. What can you tell us about building an SDG roadmap?
Well, in effect, very, very interesting debate we had. I think we can say our main topics have been, one, we need to adapt SDGs to the policies that are being developed within each cities. SDGs are only as good as they meet the strategic plans and the goals and KPIs that a particular city has actually made. To the question, which I thought was interesting, we shared with Miguel. In the end, what would you have done differently if SDGs weren't there? He said something like, well, actually, the SDGs helped us to put together different pieces. And in effect, it's the dimensions of economic, social, and environmental being confronted at all times that have actually helped to reach better decisions. So one, adapt. Two, replicate. I think we were concerned with, it's nice to hear that Barcelona or LA have nice SDG frameworks, but how about mid-sized cities? And the answer there, of course, we don't have it, but what we heard is that there's probably a methodology that we can develop to make sure that an SDG approach is being developed. And that means making sure that three components work together. One, the city councils need to work on it. Two, citizen engagement need to happen in some shape or form. And three, nice to have some academics that can actually come in and help in the process. Third subject is watch for governance. I think it's all very nice to talk about sustainability department owning SDGs. It's important to know, sorry, I can't see myself anymore. I don't know if it's working, but
we can still hear you.
Okay, it's important to know what has been developed inside each city in terms of the rapport, the avoidance of having silos play their bad part in making sure that sustainability is taken into account, and having a framework certainly does help in that respect. The last point is going forward. We were asking ourselves, well, how can SDGs really be transformational? Are they transformational? And I think we came to the conclusion that it's nice to have a framework. It's probably the next step for many cities to actually have a model where you actually establish correlation and causality between, what might be criteria used and what actually happens on the ground. There's certainly correlation between criteria used in SDG frameworks, and that needs to be either measured or certainly pointed in some degree of detail. So a framework is nice, a model is better.
Well, fantastic! Wow, that is amazing. What a productive team. And by the way, everything we're talking about is recorded, so we'll make that available to you all. So if you ever want to listen to it again, I want to just take the last session, Tone's session, which is a crucial one because it's really about planning ahead and how to use technology and digital twins to do so. Tone, what wisdom can you give us on this topic?
Yeah, and I'll try to keep it brief, even though there was a lot discussed in the session. So the city is the interface, the infrastructure interface between us, the people who live there, and the planet. And for the planet, there needs to be a green transition as a, let's say, common conclusion from our panel. And a green transition, and now I'm going to quote Philippe, the Vice Mayor of Porto, a green transition is a digital transition. You cannot go green without going digital.
Interesting.
And in order to do that and to do it timely, we need to move faster. And the sprinter cities are doing that and showing results accordingly. Excellent.
I like that. It's a slogan we could all live with.
I think so, yeah.
City is a smart city. So, look, I think that's it. Bill, would you like to say any last words before we wrap up?
Just want to thank you, Lou, and all of CityAge for helping get this organized. I think the event was very valuable for everybody here that was able to attend, and really appreciate that, and for all the leaders for sharing their insights, because I think, as I mentioned earlier, not just partnerships, but the community that you all are is what makes this successful. So the more you can learn from each other and go forward, that's great. So, and thank you, Lou, for your leadership here.
Well, thank you so much. Now, look, I just want to remind you, all of the results, the full study, the case studies, the regional scorecards, the key findings, all up on our website. Just go to riskierworld.com. And we will be putting up a recording of the plenary session, I think, Mark, up on that website as well. And I'm very impressed with what you all have been talking about. And I'm going to have our editors perhaps write it up into a conclusion paper so that we all have it, because I think it's a good compass for what we all need to be thinking about next. Naomi, anything from your side?
Yeah, I'm just going to wrap it up there, Lou. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to each of our panelists for such a fantastic conversation. We're so thrilled that everyone was able to be here today, and we're going to be announcing more CityAge events, so please stay tuned. We hope to see you with us again.